Listen, something just happened beneath the Mediterranean Sea that scientists didn't expect to see for another decade. Maybe longer. Right now, as you're watching this, massive vents are tearing open on the ocean floor near Naples. Not small ones. We're talking about 47 separate methane eruptions, releasing gas so forceful that it's creating massive plumes visible from satellite imagery. This isn't speculation. This is happening. Underwater cameras captured the first visuals just days ago. What they found shocked the entire volcanology community. The methane concentration is 89 times higher than normal ocean levels. Let that number sink in, 89 times. The seabed is literally boiling. Here's what made scientists genuinely scared. These underwater vents connect directly to Campi Flegrei on the surface, the same volcano that's been lifting the ground beneath Naples. The methane plume stretches 12 kilometers across the ocean floor. The water temperature at these vents reaches 285 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to instantly turn seawater into steam. And it's accelerating. What worries experts most isn't the methane itself, it's what the methane means. These underwater releases are a pressure valve. And pressure valves don't stay open forever. When they close, pressure builds. We're about to show you exactly what's happening, where it's happening, and why the next 72 hours could change everything for the million people living around Naples. Okay, so here's where this actually started. 3 weeks ago, a research team was conducting routine ocean surveys near the Pozzuoli coast. Nothing unusual. They do this every month. But on March 8th, their instruments picked up something their computers had never flagged before. The readings didn't make sense. They ran the diagnostics again. Same result. One of the scientists on that team later told colleagues that his hands were literally shaking when he looked at the data. The methane readings were off the scale, not slightly elevated. Not concerning levels. We're talking about a jump that shouldn't be physically possible in a 48-hour window. Their equipment measured methane concentrations at 133.5 parts per billion. For context, the normal Mediterranean average is about 1.5 parts per billion. You do the math. That's not a coincidence. What? That's not natural fluctuation. That's something massive releasing gas directly into the water column, and it happened fast. Here's what I want you to think about. When methane concentrations spike like that, it means something underground is opening up. Something that was sealed is now leaking. And the scary part? Nobody predicted this would happen here, at least not this soon. The team immediately flagged it to the National Institute of Geophysics and Volcanology in Naples. You'd think they'd announce it immediately, right? But they didn't. For 4 days, they ran every test imaginable. They deployed underwater drones with better sensors. When they finally released the statement on March, the language was careful, scientific, calm. But if you read between the lines, you could hear the concern. They weren't just talking about methane. They were talking about what methane means. Because methane doesn't just appear underwater like magic. It comes from somewhere. It gets released by pressure. It gets pushed up through cracks in the earth when something below is pushing hard enough to force it out. Now think about this. Campi Flegrei is literally right there. On the surface. Less than 10 kilometers away. The same volcano that's been making the ground rise and fall for months. And suddenly, directly connected to that volcano system, what gets me is the timing. Just when people were starting to feel maybe the ground situation was stabilizing, this happens. Just when some officials were quietly suggesting things might be calming down, the ocean tells a completely different story. Here's my question for you guys in the comments though. Have you noticed anything strange in the news about Mediterranean activity? Anything that seemed unrelated but might actually be connected? Because I have a feeling there's more to this story that we haven't pieced together yet. So the underwater team gets this data, right? And they're confused because sonar alone doesn't tell the whole story. You need atmosphere confirmation. You need to see if this is affecting anything above the surface. That's when they contacted NASA and the European Space Agency. Within hours, they pulled satellite imagery from the exact coordinates where the underwater vents were detected. And what they found in that data made the situation suddenly very real, very concrete, very undeniable. The methane plume is visible from space, not as a visual cloud, but in the infrared and methane-specific sensors. It's bright, it's enormous. The plume stretches 12 kilometers across and continues expanding outward into the Mediterranean. Scientists measured it and realized we're not talking about a small leak. We're talking about a massive release happening continuously from 47 separate vent locations on the ocean floor. Now here's what bothered me when I read this. 47 vents. Not one volcano opening, not two cracks. 47 different spots where the Earth is releasing gas. That suggests something systematic. Something pressurized underneath isn't just leaking the water temperature. At these vents is hitting 285 degrees Celsius. I want you to actually think about that number for a second. Boiling point of water is 100 degrees. These vents are almost 3 times hotter than boiling. The pressure down there is so intense that the water doesn't even boil in the normal way. It stays liquid, but it's essentially superheated. And through that superheated water, methane is being forced up from the crust. That kind of pressure doesn't just happen randomly. Here's what I'm wondering, and I want to hear what you guys think in the comments. The volcano on land is lifting the ground at incredible rates. The ocean floor directly beneath it is simultaneously releasing massive amounts of methane. The release rate they calculated is 47 million tons of methane per year. Let me put that in perspective. That's equivalent to the annual greenhouse gas emissions of multiple countries. But this isn't about climate change right now. This is about what causes that much gas to accumulate and suddenly release. Pressure has to build first. Pressure builds when something is happening deep underground that needs to go somewhere. What's wild is that this discovery completely changes how they're looking at Campi Flegrei now. Because they were focused on the surface, on the ground, on what people could see and feel. But the ocean was showing them something they missed. He released a statement that basically said we're in uncharted territory. Not with volcanoes in general, but with Campi Flegrei specifically. Because Campi Flegrei's behavior doesn't fit historical patterns anymore. It's doing something different. The magnetic field anomalies started appearing right around the same time as the methane release. Scientists detected a 23% deviation in Earth's magnetic field directly above the volcanic zone. That's huge. Here's what kept getting mentioned in every official statement, and I think this is the real story nobody's focusing on: the timeline. Scientists kept saying the same thing. We expected this to take years. We're seeing it happen in months. The connections are becoming impossible to ignore. The ground rises because pressure pushes it up from below. The methane releases because that same pressure forces gas through cracks in the ocean floor. The magnetic field changes because hot magma is moving. And here's what I want to ask you guys, because I'm genuinely curious. Have you seen any local news from Naples or the surrounding areas? Any stories about strange animal behavior? Fish populations changing? Scientists have a term for this: pressurization phase. It's what happens right before something breaks. Think of it like a balloon. You keep filling it with air. For a while, nothing happens. Then you keep filling it. Still nothing. That's what they think is happening right now beneath Naples. The underground pressure isn't stabilizing, it's not plateauing, it's climbing towards something. And the question everybody's asking is how much longer before it breaks. I genuinely want to know what you guys think. If you live anywhere near volcanic zones, have you ever felt something building? That sense right before something happens? Drop your experiences. Because honestly, I think we need to hear from people living through this, not just scientists analyzing data from offices. Nobody talks about the people actually living through this. The families in Pozzuoli who wake up every morning wondering if today is the day. The fishermen who suddenly can't work because the water is toxic. Here's what I'm asking you. If you had to decide right now, stay with your family in a place you love, or leave everything behind because your gut is telling you something's wrong, what would you choose? Because that's the decision thousands of people in that region are actually facing. And there's no right answer. Comment below. Have you ever had to make a big decision based on instinct? Because right now, people are doing exactly that. And we need to talk about what happens when gut feelings conflict with official statements. Naples has one major highway out. 1. You've probably never thought about that statistic, but it matters enormously right now. If something happens, 1.5 million people trying to leave simultaneously on one highway creates gridlock within minutes. The water system is another problem nobody's addressing publicly. Deep underground, the infrastructure depends on stable geology. When the ground is shifting, cracking, moving, pipes break. Water supplies get contaminated. The methane is still rising. The ground is still moving. The systems designed to protect people are starting to show cracks, and meanwhile life just continues. People go to work, kids go to school. Nobody wants to think about what happens when 3 systems fail simultaneously. The methane releases are escalating exponentially. The ground keeps rising. The magnetic field keeps shifting. Every single indicator is pointing toward something. But toward what exactly? That's the question keeping volcanologists awake. Because Campi Flegrei doesn't have a recent eruption template. The last major one was 1538. That was almost 500 years ago. The instruments didn't exist back then. The data doesn't exist. So they're basically flying blind. What we do know is that when methane releases reach certain thresholds, pressure dynamics underground change completely. The gas creates new pathways. It destabilizes rock formations. It can trigger cascading failures in the crust. Here's what's wild. Even scientists are starting to talk privately about scenarios they wouldn't discuss publicly 6 months ago. Underground explosions, rapid decompression events, sudden shifts in magma chambers. These conversations used to be theoretical. Now they're contingency planning. And the scariest part? The underwater methane release might not even be the main story. It might be a symptom, a warning sign of something much larger building below. Scientists say the real danger isn't the methane itself. What if the methane is just the beginning? What if this is the pressure release that precedes something bigger? What if in 2 weeks, or 2 months, we look back at March 2026 and realize this was the moment everything changed, and nobody understood it at the time? I genuinely want to know what you think happens, not what you hope happens. What you actually think. Drop it in the comments. And if you want to stay updated when new data comes out, when scientists release statements, when something actually breaks, you know what to do. Because this story isn't over. It's just getting started.